Okay, can we start then, Ali?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to your regular Sunday chats with Bach Launch. Thank you so much to Ali and the Bach Launch community for continuing to host really amazing conversations. I've been grateful to be part of them on the other side, but I've really actually loved more moderating these conversations with people that I really love and admire. One of those people is Myra Qureshi, who's a dear friend of mine and someone who I'm so proud to be a friend of hers because of what she's been building in Pakistan in the beauty industry, but also what it represents as pushing the industry forward, what's we're seeing as a global standard, pushing it forward from a local standard as well. And so welcome, Myra, and we're gonna dig into everything Conatural today and talk about your future plans, but also just generally industry trends, things that we're seeing. So welcome.
Hey, Kilson, really nice to see you. Thank you so much for all the lovely words. It's great to see you again.
Good to see you too. I was telling Myra actually before this started that she's looking very glowy, which is very on brand with Conatural and all of the amazing products that they have. I'm actually a frequent user of most Conatural products, especially a lot of the face oils and things like that. But let's dig in. So for those of you who don't know about the beauty industry, it is actually a $480 billion industry globally. Right. And when we talk about natural beauty, it's also like a very large part of that and growing. Conatural, for those who don't know, is a leader in the Pakistan beauty space when it comes to natural and organic cruelty-free beauty products. They've been building this journey for a few years now, have their own factory where they manufacture everything locally. So while, we want to dig into all of those things, but Myra, why don't we just first start with something? I know you've told your story many times, but a lot of people may not know that you were working in London and you were in finance, and for you to leave that and begin and start this journey with your sister Rima, why don't you first tell us what inspired that? What inspired you or pushed you to begin this journey with Conatural?
Okay, hi everyone, my name is Myra and it's really nice to be here. Thank you to Ali and the Bach Launch community for hosting me, and thank you Kulsoom for hosting this. It's really an honor and a pleasure to be here. Okay, so the story is, it's a bit of a long one and I'll try and shorten it as much as possible, but in short, I am from Lahore and I grew up here. I studied here all my life, and then I went to the LSE in London for my bachelor's degree. And from there, I actually started a career in investment banking and financial services. I worked at Citigroup, ING, and Deloitte. And then while I was at Deloitte, I also completed my executive MBA from Georgetown Esade, and also my CIMA certificate. So I was a total finance girl. The story of Conatural kind of was by accident, and it was actually a need for personal cosmetics for myself. So it was in 2007. I was in Southeast Asia. I was on gardening leave, and I was sitting on the beach, and I'd always suffered from really bad hay fever, allergies. As a child, I could never use, or as a teenager rather, when all of my friends were using all these fancy Clinique products, I could never use any. I had really, really sensitive skin. And when I went to the UK, my hay fever went crazy. And I tried all sorts of allopathic medicine, and it kind of worked and it kind of didn't. And it's quite debilitating. So I found myself in Southeast Asia, and I was sitting on a beach, and this woman came up to me, and that day I was actually quite ill with allergies. And she said, "Hey, why are you crying?" And I said, No, I'm not crying. I just have really bad allergies. And she said, "Well, I'm a naturopath, and if you have time, come and see me the next day, and I'll give you some stuff." And I was on holiday, so I was like, sure. And the next day I went in. This is in 2007, and she kind of introduced me to the world of essential oils like lemongrass, eucalyptus, lavender, citronella. And she said, "Why don't you try this for your allergies?" And I did, and they just worked miracles for me. And I was shocked because I tried sort of all sorts of allopathic medicine, and whilst, if you're a Pakistani, you probably understand what Ayurveda is, what Hikmat is, etc., because your grandmothers probably grabbed you at some point as a child and put like coconut oil or olive oil in your hair, especially if you're a girl. You know about sarson ka tel, which is mustard oil. There's a lot of stuff which is subcontinentally very accepted with natural ingredients that was never really talked about in the West. And so I was really excited to use these products, and they worked amazing for me. And anyway, then I went back to the UK, and I was kind of back into my financial services life. And I started using these, and I was like, these are actually really, really good. And I tried to source them for myself. And at that time, there was only the Facebook had just kind of come around. There was no Instagram. There was eBay. Essential oils weren't really big in Europe. They were quite big in the States. Normal kind of cosmetic stores didn't carry them. So I would kind of sit with a few friends and like translate on Google what like lemongrass would be. And not many people traveled to Thailand at that time, or Cambodia and stuff either. So I would kind of like source my essential oils from the States and bring them. And I kind of got really obsessed with the concept of natural remedies at the time. And I really didn't speak to many people about it, especially my UK friends, because I felt that in the UK, if you tell people that you like homeopathic medicine or you believe in natural remedies, they kind of think you're a bit of a quack. So I actually spent a lot of time in like the library and on the internet. There wasn't a lot of research out there on the internet, but like researching natural remedies and stuff, especially for myself. This was never for a business. And kind of became like an investment banker by day and chemist by night. Like over the course of 2-3 years, I read over 200 books and scientific papers, etc. on it. So anyway, fast forward many years, in 2014, I found myself on sabbatical in Pakistan. And again, I was looking at products for myself in Pakistan, which were truly natural, essential oil-based, no added chemicals. And I was shocked to find that there's actually very little in the market, considering we are a very Hikmat Ayurvedic-based society. And I kind of was looking for myself, and I kind of got obsessed with looking. And surely there has to be some stuff, like other than the corner stop holy, where you could actually take some almonds and say, hey, can you make this into an oil for me? There was no finished product that was available. And so I was like, well, I think I'm onto something. And because I had time, I used to kind of stand in a hypermarket like aisles and ask women, like, do you not really want natural products? Have you ever tried to look for them? And I started doing some crazy research on the market. And I kind of found 4 trends in the Pakistani market. One was that the beauty market, which is very big in Pakistan, was actually fueled by an obsession for whitening. And so most beauty products that were available were whitening based, whitening face wash, whitening creams. And then if you looked at the ingredients, they weren't ever quite properly labeled. What was also shocking was that even the big companies like the FMCGs, which were multinational mostly, and even the local manufacturers, they were making whitening creams or creams. Well, let me put it this way. They were all in the business of making whitening creams. It was one of their key products. But what was really sad was 2 things. The local manufacturers were using very dangerous chemicals, sometimes even banned chemicals, because I got them tested, such as mercury and hydrocortisone and steroids, to kind of get you that whitening aspect in like 5-6 days, and knowing full well that they're banned and very, very bad for human health. Secondly, I felt that there was a huge trend for this whitening concept, which kind of went from the local manufacturers and the FMCGs to promote whitening on advertising. I mean, they on TV, you saw, if you're white, you get a good job. If you're white or fair, you get married. If you're white, you get a promotion. And for me, it was just absolute filth. And I didn't understand why. And I was like, surely there has to be a stand against this. What I also found was there was not a lot of quality product out there. Everything was very price conscious. And even if stuff was labeled herbal, it wasn't. It was like a chemical base with one herb in it, and suddenly becomes a herbal product. There was no certified organic ingredients being used. There was no certified organic certifications. And also there were ingredients that were being sold as natural, but they actually weren't natural at all. So I got some oils tested. Like there was an almond oil brand. I got it tested, and I was shocked to find out that 80% of that almond oil bottle consisted of mineral oil. Only there was about 10-15% which was actually almond oil, and the rest was almond extract for the fragrance. So I was like, wow, I mean, this stuff is just being sold to consumers. People don't know, the government doesn't have resources to kind of regulate this, even though they are trying their best. So I was like, I think I'm onto something. And that's how kind of the concept of Conatural was born, by accident. And then I guess, we said, we did a full business plan for about 8 months. Rima, or my sister, my co-founder, neither of us were formulators, even though I kind of was obsessed with this topic. So we hired some formulators out of the UK and Australia, and a chemist locally, and we made a small factory, and we started with 7 products, and we went online with them. I just come back from the UK, so I knew kind of online was the way forward, and we had a tremendous response. In like 4 months, or 3.5 months, we broke even, and we're like, yeah, this is awesome. And that's when we invested more money, got a proper factory, and I guess today we make about 120 SKUs. We stock in about 400 plus stores. 2 of them are on our own. We sell online. We do a few exports. We do private label. And that's the story of Conatural.
That's a good story. So, I mean, ultimately, you guys are kind of at the forefront of challenging a beauty standard that is so, in a lot of ways, it's so ingrained in this like post-colonial mindset that white is best, right? And all of that. And so for you guys to kind of be at the forefront of not only challenging that, but also pushing new standards for what anyone, women, men, what we should be asking for in our products. And so let's fast forward to today, right? You guys are the fastest growing, natural beauty company in the country. You guys are right now, you said you're stocking over, you said 150 stock keeping units, SKUs?
Yeah, about 120.
120,
right? Of which about 60 are our own, and 60 we do for other people.
Right. So all of that, and I was, on your website, obviously exploring all the different verticals, and, there's hair care, there's skin care, there's baby care, which I know it launched relatively recently, right? Pre-COVID, but all of these things are quite interesting in terms of, just the different experiments that you guys make in terms of putting things out there. So what I'm curious about, because you guys are kind of at the forefront of putting products out there that maybe people don't even realize that they were missing, what pushes you guys to create new products? And is it really being pushed by, is there kind of a push and pull of demand that's coming for it? Or is it also you guys being kind of those forefront pioneers and saying, no, this is actually what you need, and you're building the market for yourselves?
So I think it's over time, if we see it's a bit of both. So we wanted to be the
sorry, I'm just going to pause you. We're getting a few chats saying that people can't hear you super well. So maybe if you can move a little bit closer to your computer, there's a bit of an echo. So just want to adjust that.
Is it better now?
It is better. Yeah, I think so. But I could always hear you okay. So I'll let people, yes, it does. People can hear you better. So let's talk about, yeah, cool. So let's talk about the push and pull of demand and things that you're putting out there.
Yeah, so I was saying that it's a bit of both. I mean, over time, if you look at it, it's a bit of both. So when we started, obviously, and even now, we want to be the trend setter in the market. So we bring out specific products or lines, and then obviously it's a very difficult job that we do, but we kind of create that awareness as to why that product is good for you, why it's not. We constantly do awareness about non-whitening, and then also we kind of wanted to set the standard for in Pakistan, and go out and massively say, one, like, this is completely natural and organic. There's no parabens, no sulfates, no mineral oil, no artificial color, no artificial fragrance, and kind of make people aware and educate them as to why these things are bad for you. And then at the same time, try and say that we are the first company to commit to no animal testing in Pakistan, which is a very big deal at the time. Now many people do it. Thirdly, we are the first women-led natural and organic beauty brand in Pakistan. Create awareness for that, and of course, one of our things was we want to recycle more. Again, set a trend for that. Set a trend for getting more women into the workplace. I'm really proud to say that more than 50% of our staff at Conatural are women. So we wanted to create kind of soft trends as well as ingredient-based trends. So these were the kind of the soft trends, and then the hard ingredient trends were, certain lines. 5 years ago, argan oil was a really big trend, so where we brought it to the market. even though it's Moroccan. Certain ingredients like, our traditional Upton and stuff, we're like, well, how can we make this easier to use? How do we modernize the recipe? So that was kind of like, we know people like to use Upton. How can we modernize it, for like Pakistani brides, etc. So we've kind of done a bit of both. Carrier oils, for example, have been around for centuries. And we know that Pakistani communities love olive oil, coconut oil, almond oil, etc. So we're like, well, how can we make it better? We were the first people to, start cold pressed oils, certified organic oils. So I think it's been kind of a mix of both, pull and push that we're doing. And that's kind of our strategy for the future as well.
And so and that's what's kind of amazing, right? You're pushing things out there, also educating consumers, right? Who may not know about things, or also reviving trends and modernizing it that people may not have realized, that were things that were part of our culture for so long, but are now kind of being modernized by Conatural. What hasn't worked? So, I mean, we're talking about the things that you're putting out there that worked. It's stuff out there. There's obviously there's iteration constantly of listening to what the consumer base doesn't like at all. So I'm also curious of what hasn't worked with the consumer base so far.
So for example, there's certain ingredients that we tried to push that are actually amazing, but just didn't click with people. Maybe we did a bad job in educating people about them. Maybe we just expected that they'd already know about it. Example would be, for example, avocado oil is one of our carrier oils. We use it massively in a lot of our skin formulas as well. But as a carrier oil, it didn't really work in Pakistan, which is really strange. As in it did, but it's a very, very small market. Similarly, I think we realized very quickly that no matter what we do, this is not the US, everything is incredibly price conscious. Mm-hmm. So a couple of products that we spend a lot of time and energy and in deploying them, we learned that, well, actually we have to be very, very price consistent. And there are a couple of examples, irrelevant here, but we failed in pricing it correctly. We made the product too expensive for the Pakistani market. So it does sell, but we can't sell those volumes. But at that formulation, we had to change it eventually to kind of fit the price point.
Okay, good to know. And it's good to know because I think the Pakistani consumer generally is quite price sensitive. Yeah. So I think that's a really important point. I think for me too, I've personally been to your factory in Lahore and really saw up close. I think it was actually the day that I was visiting was the audit of your ISO certification. So it was just really saw up close how stringent your processes were, not just for ISO, but obviously being cruelty free, being natural. So much of that is actually reflected. I mean, you and I were talking about there's been a lot of consumer beauty trends that have been talked about for what's happening in 2021, right? And a lot of that about natural beauty, about, Gen Z consumers, all of those things are somewhat being reflected by your practices locally. So I'm just curious, what is pushing you? Because if it's not the local consumer that's necessarily holding you accountable, what is pushing you to be held accountable for yourselves? Is it the global trends that you're looking at? And also, as we talk about the interplay of global and local, the global consumer and those trends that we're seeing, are you seeing anything that is similarly reflected in the local consumer?
Okay, so let's talk about first, in terms of global versus local, in terms of market, right? I wish they were the same. They've got some similar traits, but they're not the same because in Pakistan, you still have a very, very price conscious market. And as manufacturers and retailers of the product, we're very, very cognizant of that, or have forced to be. So if you look at the average cosmetic product, let's say in the US, or what an average girl in the US would be buying, in her basket of cosmetic goods, it's almost 3 times what it is in Pakistan, which is a huge disparity. And this is kind of on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. Sometimes it goes up to even 6x, 6 times. So I think that way it's very, very different. As I mentioned, there's some obviously similar qualities as well. At the end of the day, as I feel, especially in the last 10 years, especially with the advent of social media, especially with the the fact that data is now on your fingertips, even the young Pakistani consumer, we're a very young population. The average age of a Pakistani consumer is 24 years old these days. So the influx of social media, people have access to more trends than they did even a year ago or 2 years ago. And so what they demand is could be to a global level. So, for example, high quality product, priced well, obviously much lower priced here. A lot of the young consumers are very different to the older ones, just like abroad. Like they're more, let's say, socially conscious. They are more, let's say, they want more recycling. They actually want to know what's behind the brand. If you look at the McKinsey study that was published last year, they actually said that in the pandemic as well, they figured out that actually young people are not very brand loyal at all anymore, which is why many of the big designer brands are suffering, and which shows that, and it's the same in Pakistan, people switch like that. But they usually stick to you if they like you, if they know who the owner is, what your ethos is. And for us, like to answer your second question, is that for us, has always been, it's for Rima and I, it's not just about being, a seller for beauty, it's also about bringing some sort of change. Bringing more women to the workplace. We're both tree huggers. Like, let's do more recycling. What are the kind of things that we can do to make a social impact with this company? And so I think that's also what's kind of stuck with most of our consumers, which is good. And that, again, is not a local trend, it's a global trend.
Totally.
So, there's some differences. And obviously, if you look at our population, it's massive. And the number of people who we should be worried about many things isn't. But, I think that this will massively change in the next couple of years.
Yeah. And I think what we've seen in beauty, even globally, is it's also very aspirational, right? In terms of people aspire to kind of, if they're seeing trends happen, regardless of where they are in the world, we're seeing people aspire to kind of mimic what we're seeing our favorite celebrities wearing or things that influencers are putting forward. And I'm curious, like, have you guys leveraged, and I know you have, but I'm just curious in terms of that marketing strategy, have you leveraged influencers in your own marketing strategy?
Absolutely. Yes, we have. I think that influencer marketing in any industry, especially in beauty, I think it's more applicable for makeup, to be honest, but even in skincare, we have reached out to many influencers. We have a lot of influencers who work with us. A lot of influencers that have actually even just given us self-love. Like, we never send products to them, but they've given us a lot of love on their page and stuff. I'm incredibly grateful for that. But yes, as a marketing strategy, we do work with them. I think that for a lot of future launches, that they're a big part of, our awareness campaigns.
For sure. We have a question in the chat just to clarify, though we have been talking about this a little bit, is your target market, gender and age. So gender, I think obviously it's very geared towards women, but let's maybe break it down a little bit more about that target demographic.
Sure. So we generally our target market is so as I said, we make about 60 SKUs, which we're selling all the time in the market, which are our main hit sellers. So for that, our main target market is 25 to 35 years old. However, we do have products for 35 plus women. We have an anti-aging range, and we also have stuff for younger people. Like lip balms and lip scrubs for, like, maybe let's say the 22 to 25, but our main hit market is 25 to 35. In terms of gender, yes, it's mainly women. 95% of our customers are women, and surprisingly, a lot of those women also buy for men. So it's always hard to bifurcate what they're giving to their respective
and I was
husbands.
just going to say, men can also use the products. It's not only for women.
Yes, they can. All of our products are unisex. Some of our fragrances aren't, which is the only thing. So, guys will just be like, I don't feel like smelling like a rose. That's okay.
Yeah, but you can use the hair oil, guys. I'm just saying, for like your hair issues, the hair oil works great. So.
Yeah. The men love the hair oil. The men love the shampoos. Some of our face washes. But yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Great. So you were talking about the fact that you and Rima are both tree huggers. One thing that was, went a little bit viral on social media was this recycling campaign that you guys put out about reusing bottles and creating this really cool vending machine style machine, basically that was, for recycling, reusing bottles. Can you talk to us a little bit about what inspired that? Because again, it's forward thinking for a market like ours, right? Where recycling just generally is something that we're pushing forward as a country. What pushed you guys to do something like that? And what has been the response so far to that effort?
Okay, so about 2 years ago, we were looking at our soft missions as a company. And we said, no matter how big we grow or how small we remain, one of the things that Rima and I wanted to do for the company was be like the leader in at least thought process for recycling. And for that, we wanted to kind of touch upon two things. One is, how can we reduce single-use plastic? And number two, how can we reduce the usage of water? And so we kind of set out a strategy last year. And unfortunately, with the pandemic, we've not been able to fully, implement this strategy because most of retail was shut. However, with this kind of strategy has four main objectives. One was obviously recycling our bottles. So we actually wanted to set up recycling. We're in about 400 odd stores. So we thought that in every major city, including in our own stores, we would set up recycling stations. People would come and return their bottles to us and they would get a voucher or free product in return. This obviously we had to delay because of COVID. A, stuff was shut down, and B, there's a lot of touching, and so kind of made it unsafe. The second was this refill station, and we're like, well, if you can have vending machines for absolutely everything, whether it's a Coke, Pepsi, water, chocolate bars around the world, why can't we have a vending machine for our recycling effort? And it's a cool thing to do, and it's again for single-use plastic, and we want to kind of be ahead of the game for everyone. And there's a very cool startup called The VAM, which actually developed these refill stations. Mm-hmm. And we linked up with them. They reached out to us and were like, yeah, we love it. We want to do a pilot. So currently we're doing a pilot with them in their store to see, offtake. And the whole idea for this was that it doesn't matter whether it's a Conatural bottle. Bring any bottle so that you reuse it, put it in the refilling station, punch in how much you want, and then it'll automatically dispense, and then weigh and pay, and Bob's your uncle. And we got so much love for that on social media, and it was really, really heartening. And we actually want to take that to all the malls, big malls in Pakistan, as well as to our own stores. The only thing that's stopping us right now is the pandemic, again, because people are bringing their own bottles. A lot of retailers are not very happy with that. So we kind of have to just wait on this, but it's definitely on the agenda for us to kind of really roll this out. Thirdly, as I said, waterless technology. This is more for our factory usage. Imagine we make so much product every day, and every time you make a product in a big machine, you have to wash that machine. There's a lot of water wastage. It's not like leather or textile, but it's still water wastage. And we feel that Pakistan is a country where we've already been through an electricity crisis, we've already been through a gas crisis, and a water crisis is actually coming, but no one wants to talk about it. So as being tree huggers, we're like, we want to talk about it. And just to give you an example to everyone on the forum, our factory, we had to dig, our bore is like 300 feet to get, and it's still not clean. And so we have to go further and further. And we're based in Lahore. The water table is constantly going down. And water scarcity is a thing. It's going to become a thing in Pakistan. And we're like, well, not only as a marketing strategy, but what can we do as a small company to help this and bring awareness about this? So all of the new machines that we're installing, they all recycle the water. I'm really excited about it. We're going to make some videos and post about them, and you watch this space. It's going to be next month. And so anything that we're using to clean, we're going to recycle all of the water based in our factory. Something nice that we want to do. It's a drop in the ocean for all of our recycling bits, but we want to talk about it. We want everyone to do it. And we hope that we can inspire big companies and everyone out there to try and be more sustainable.
But that's what it takes, right? Like it takes people that are audacious in, even though you are, a smaller company compared to the larger, P&Gs, whatever out there in the world, like you guys leading by example are like, that's the first step that's needed. And I think that's amazing. You were talking about the impact of the pandemic. And I know that for, the impact of the pandemic on retail overall globally was big. You've always kind of been direct to consumer and also had retail. You obviously exported, you were producing for other stores as well. What was the impact of the pandemic on Conatural? And then also would love to kind of learn if there's been a shift like in consumer behavior. Did people become more comfortable with ordering online as a result? I mean, we've seen that in other sectors in Pakistan. So I'm just curious, like what has been the impact for you overall?
So I can only speak for kind of skincare and Conatural. Generally, of course, the pandemic has been hard for many industries, and some industries have flourished. But for us, I guess, in the beginning, which was last March when the pandemic hit Pakistan, We actually got really lucky because we were anticipating this back in January, and we very quickly launched hand sanitizers. And we were one of the first companies locally to launch hand sanitizers. And so that kind of saved us in the first 3 months where people didn't really know what was happening. Stuff was shutting down and then opening up and then shutting down completely. So that, that really took us through there. And then as the pandemic kind of settled in and people were like, okay, yeah, this is going to be kind of our way of life for a while. Our online sales, and as you said, we've always been direct to consumer. So our online sales were pretty good. Last year, we were also in the midst of investing a lot in the brand. And that kind of worked. And then we also saw that we make skin and hair care products. We don't make makeup. And I know that makeup has really suffered in the last 1 year. Obviously, you're not going out, people are not going to work, they're not going to parties, there's no dinners. So obviously women are not wearing a lot of makeup. And so that kind of makes sense. But we did find that, we call it, root singhar at home. People had a bit more time to do that. Even if they were working, they would maybe oil their hair or put on a face mask. So our sales did go up. We also launched a couple of products just before the pandemic started, and they actually started doing really, really well. So for us, the pandemic was fine, and we did well. As a matter of fact, we raised during the pandemic. We raised.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more.
That was like November last year. So yeah, we raised $825,000. And since then, we've also been heavily investing in the brand. So, we're doing well, and generally our sales have been really, really going up. But, of course, there will always be a shift back to retail. At the end of the day, this is I think it's a global thing. Even in the US, online businesses are huge, but I think they make up like less than 1 or 2% of overall sales. So I think that people have been cooped up, and there will always be a shift back to retail. And at the end of the day, this is a skincare product. You want to feel it, you want to
try it on, exactly.
Yeah. So of course you can sell it online. There's a lot of repeat purchase online. Sometimes it's even like random first-time purchase, and you're hooked. But of course, I think that this will always have a space in retail. And I think that this may not come back completely, but it will.
Yeah, and I think the interplay, especially in beauty, between retail and online is always really interesting. I remember I was telling you when I went to the Glossier flagship store, it was so great to actually be able to try things on in person, even though Glossier really started as a D2C brand, right? So even brands that are so huge in the US are still building out flagship stores, which actually closed down during the pandemic as well. So it's interesting to kind of see how some of these really big brands got impacted. And also to your point about the pandemic, one of the big trends that was talked about globally in the beauty space was a trend towards self-care, to what you were saying, right? Of women maybe not putting money into makeup, but wanting to buy face masks or things, exactly what you were saying. So it's really interesting to see how global is reflected locally as well, and just generally how interconnected consumers are. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat, so I want to start to get to some of them. Okay, there's actually 2 that are really created. There are 3 that are actually all really closely linked to each other. So one question is, from conception to getting the product out in market, how long does it typically take for you? And then I'm gonna actually loop that in with Bilal's question, which is, do you introduce your new products as an MVP through lean measures, or do you rigorously research and plan your products before introducing them?
So the answer to the question is that it really depends on the product. Usually we were like, I'll give you 2 examples. So there was a couple of hotels who wanted for us to manufacture a range of products for them. That's something easy. We've done it before. So something like that would typically take us about 3 to 5 months. But whereas if we're going for a big launch of like a range of our, a new range of skincare, it can take anywhere between 6 months to a year. And the reason is that, and I saw a question before that, and I hope that this answers this, is that we always have to create the product. We have to ensure that that it works on your skin, that it's stable. We have to challenge test it. Remember, we're in Pakistan. We live in crazy temperatures. Like right now, it's like maybe 50 odd degrees in Multan, and up in the mountains, it's still like 10 degrees or even lower in some of the major cities of Pakistan. So we have to challenge it, test it to temperatures. We have to microbiologically test it to ensure that it has no contaminants and it meets a shelf life. And of course, then we have to test it on skin types. Like, does this work? Do people even like it? Do people like the fragrances? There's a focus group involved. Then, of course, the design of packaging. We just don't, we're not like, I feel in Pakistan, many of the big companies, they don't even focus on packaging, which is really, really sad. We focus a lot on our packaging. And we do a lot of a lot of focus studies on, oh, did you like the pink color, or did you like the blue color? Why? Did you like this font? You know, why did it work? Why did it not? So it's actually a lot of work for us to. It's actually the biggest chunk of our work is doing new products and making sure you get them right, because if you don't, then you're in trouble. It's very difficult to go and change them.
There was
yeah,
also
a lot of time.
There was also a follow-up question from Z, which is actually a good question, because a lot of people do, a lot of, smaller natural beauty companies do start from home and sell on Facebook or sell online. So did you ever create at home and sell first and then grow big to factory scale manufacturing, or was it commercial production from the get-go?
No, so in the first month this is when we were setting up everything. We didn't make anything. No, we never made anything at home. We had a home office for about a month before we kind of went and rented a space. So no, we always did commercial manufacturing. We've always had GMP certification. So after the first 3 months, we had an ISO 22716 certification because that was really important to us. So we've had that since we started about 4 or 5 years now. And, we're also getting other certifications. We felt that, for example, in Pakistan, a lot of consumers ask for a halal certification. So before we thought that it was never needed because all of our products are vegan anyway, but we've even gotten that done. So yeah, we've always done commercial production. It's very dodgy to do home, like skincare at home and sell it, because there's just too many contaminants, and each of our batches is challenge tested. Each of our batches is microbiologically tested in the lab. So we're very, very stringent with our quality standards, and you can't do that in the kitchen. So
yeah. And it's hard because I think for a lot of people that may be capital constrained in the beginning, like what would be your advice to someone that wants to start a natural beauty brand, but maybe doesn't have the ability to go commercial right away? Like, what would you recommend?
It's hard. I would say definitely if you're developing a product, just don't think that it's just because you can't see any contaminants and stuff like that, and that doesn't mean that they don't exist. They usually make it to the eye, and they can be very, very dangerous, even fatal to humans. So I would say if you have any product that you have created at home, spend a little bit of money and get an accredited lab to test it so that they know that the preservative that you're using works, etc. And then, of course, keep a clean environment if you can. Try and invest in at least, lab scale equipment so that you can do this. And by the way, what I'm talking about, you can even get this information online. So in the UK, for example, or in the EU, which have very, very strict regulations, whilst there are many people who are making skincare at home and selling it, let's say online or on an Instagram page, they still have to follow, the same kind of rules and regulations about safety. So it's all about being safe, obviously quality, but also about being safe, because this is like food. It can go bad and it can have very, very bad effects, if even fatal effects, if it's not meeting biological contamination standards. So I would say at least do the basic stuff.
Great. Before we move on to my questions, and I'll get back to everyone's questions, there's a lot of amazing activity in here, which is great. Ali asks, what patents, copyrights, and trademarks do you have?
So in skincare, usually you can't apply for patents because it's like food. So it's like, I can't say I made this pastry, so give me a patent. You can obviously you can patent certain ingredients. We've actually haven't gotten any patents yet, but we are thinking about applying for some this year, actually, for a couple of really cool formulas that we've made. And we're not really sure whether we will get them, because it's always a dodgy area on whether they'll be granted or not. But we are thinking of applying for 3, actually. In terms of trademarks, obviously the Conatural brand is trademarked, and we haven't trademarked any product specifically, but they come under, if people try and copy it, then it comes under the Conatural brand name, and that's how we are protected by law. So much so in Pakistan, not that much IP love is given at a commercial stage here, or a commercial scale here. There's copycats everywhere for every brand. But yeah, I mean, our company and the way we write Conatural, there are a couple of ways we write it for our branding, for our products. That's all trademarked.
I would actually argue that your moats aren't the fact that you have trademarks per se or copyright. It's the fact that you have very extensive processes and stringent ways of which you do things. It's really difficult to copy that. So that would be my argument on that. Okay, so let's talk about.
I mean, especially in Pakistan, if someone does go and copy you, I mean, they're big brands, right? I've seen, I don't want to take any names, but very like fake products of such huge brands. And what are they going to do? And yeah, you can go to court, but then that's like a 10-year game. So at the end of the day, it always has to be quality and consistency first.
Great. Okay, well, you kind of touched on this a bit in terms of the fact that you guys raised over $800,000 in capital and funding during the pandemic, right? And what we saw was that funding to the beauty and personal care startups globally hit an all-time high in 2020, and actually Q1 of 2021, we've seen it go even higher. In 2020, it was $2 billion invested in the space globally. However, at the same time, in Pakistan, only 3% of funding that has gone towards startups has gone towards female-founded or co-founded companies, right? So you and Rima are bucking that trend by virtue of who you are and what you've been building. Can you talk to us a little bit about the fact that you guys raised money, what that process was like to raise during a pandemic? And also, I mean, some of the hacks that I know that you have, like you had a trick that you did that I think worked really, really well, as well as just generally what you're seeing in the space. Would love to hear your observations.
Sure. So actually about so we're in 2021. So in 2019, we towards the end of 2019, we thought that it would be a good idea to raise money. We've been a profitable company, and we thought, yeah, maybe we should do it to accelerate our growth. And before that, we were like, let's see, because we were still trying a lot of things, and we kind of wanted to get it right before going and taking other people's money and then kind of really going with it. And so in the beginning, we had some VC offers, but then we were also not like, we were serious about it, but it was taking time, and then the pandemic hit. And then in the pandemic, as I said, we did the hand sanitizers, and we were doing really, really well because all of our marketing strategies were working really well. And so then kind of I think it was in September last year that we said, okay, I think we should really, really go for this. And we did. And I would give this advice to anyone, any fellow startup out there. The way we did it was we had all of our stuff ready. So because we'd been talking to VCs before, personally, we've been talking to you guys, we kind of knew the process as to all the itty bitty stuff that would be asked. And so we kind of made sure we had all the information we had. We had a big data room set up so that any investor or potential angel or whatever asked any question, we just point them that, this is to be in the data room, and you go there. It's nothing that we have to prepare. Then we set a date. We said, okay, we've got all the documents. We know exactly what we want to do, and we have a plan for the next 2 years. And we're going to open the round for we set a date. For us, it was 2 weeks. I would tell the startup to do the same. Don't take it further than 3 weeks. And then basically don't sleep those 3 weeks, and speak to everybody that you know, and put it out there that you're raising. And kind of, get about, and I would say, because I've been through this process, I would say bunch a couple of investors together, even if you don't know whether they know each other or they don't, and so that you appear to be transparent, and pitch to them and get them to ask questions so that you're really, really prepared, and you don't know what's going to hit you, but be really, really prepared, and kind of just go for those 3 weeks and try and close your round. And that kind of worked for us. We set a 2-week deadline, and I think in like 6 days we were oversubscribed, and then it became very difficult to choose who we wanted to be with. But I would say, yeah, 3 things: be prepared, practice, try and get people on at the same time, and like set a time. Don't be like, oh yeah, we'll see, maybe it happens in 2 months. One person's like, yeah, I'll let you know in 4 weeks. No, like if you're in, you're in, and if you're not, then you're not. But you know what else, like you were saying, with the raises, like these, I've seen it's been crazy for Pakistan in general, not very good for female founders. Like last year, I was following your deal tracker, and it was what, 65 point something million for 2020?
65.6. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and in 2021, we're already crossed 90 million. That's amazing. And it just shows the kind of FOMO people have now for, startups. If you looked at 3 years ago, it was a totally different story.
It was,
I know
yeah.
Park Launch has been a very, very big contender in this. And so thank you people from Park Launch and Ali also, because I think you've also been driving a lot of some of the things taking place. And yeah, like really cool stuff, especially post-pandemic. If you look at grocery, EdTech, what was it? Digital health, all the stuff that's thrived in the pandemic, they've done well. So awesome.
No, and I think that's great. And again, yeah, shout out to Ali and the Bach Launch community, because I think so many people on this forum have invested in deals that they've encountered through this amazing community. So I think that's been great. I would also say that as someone who's a VC in Pakistan, but also I coach female founders. I coach founders, but also coach female founders. What you did of creating FOMO is something that I talk to our female founders about all the time. And it's something that I think about a lot, even in our own fundraise, because it's so difficult for women to raise. And I think that what I always tell our female-led companies, I'm like, honestly, like every time I meet a male-led company, they're closing in 2 weeks. So it's like, it just creates that FOMO to be like, I have to like get this done really quickly. And so this idea of like keeping things open-ended is just, you need to kind of create that like fire under people's butts to like move, right? And so I think especially in spaces that are maybe, I think there's, this is a whole different conversation, but like when we talk about where most of the money is gone, it's gone towards spaces like e-commerce, fintech, and those, we haven't seen that many female-led companies very much in those spaces. And so I think it's really important for people that are out there looking at Pakistan as a whole. Like, I mean, the beauty industry is huge, right? In terms of the potential. And obviously you guys raised within it, but like, we've seen, telehealth, healthcare, all of these other spaces that are coming up. And so as much as Pakistan, I think there's been it's hitting a moment right now, there's a diversity of sectors that I think should also be looked at too, while people are paying attention to the space. So thanks for that. And what I want to talk about is kind of what the future looks like for you. And we're getting a lot of questions about that. Someone, Ali mentioned, what is your plan for global domination? But before we talk directly about that, one thing that I've been paying attention to as well as someone who loves what I love, like, general beauty stuff. Like I mostly like skincare. I don't really do a lot of makeup, but like Korean beauty, as an example, has had a really big moment in the global space, right? Of like people that have been able to export things that are considered, local to an outward audience. And I know that, Conatural has been exporting some, but I'm just curious, like when you think about what exporting looks like and exporting this idea of a Pakistani beauty standard or South Asian beauty, what you were talking about Ayurvedic before, have there been plans or thoughts around that? And I'm just curious, like what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer this in 2 ways. First, let's talk about K-beauty, right? Korea has always been in one of the 10 biggest countries in the beauty industry. Like France and Japan have always been like the gold standard of cosmetic making, but Korea has been out there. And then I think the Korean government has done a fantastic job. No one really talks about this, but in the last 15 years, they had something called Hallyu, which means the promotion and the commitment of the promotion of spread of Korean culture and export of that culture throughout the world, whether for all things like Korean, like food, drama, makeup, skincare, movies, music. So look at K-music, right, or K-pop. So the government actually, with the industrialists in Korea, talked about Hallyu and made a commitment that we're going to do this. And it's been really successful. So if you look at the beauty industry specifically, and I don't know if you've ever been to a beauty trade show around the world, but like, some of the most famous ones are Cosmoprof Las Vegas, Cosmoprof Bologna, Beauty World Middle East, Beauty World, in cosmetics, Russia. There's some big trade shows in the world. Cosmopac, another one's in Hong Kong. And every time I've been in the last 4 years, it was not last year because of the pandemic, the last 5 years now, I've been to all of them other than the Las Vegas one. And every year, the Korean government takes over a whole pavilion. And the other person who's doing a really, really good job in this space is Turkey. They also, the government is really trying to promote their cosmetics industry, and they literally buy out to promote their own industry, huge pavilions. So like you have Korea, and then like Pakistan will be that small, and you have China, and then you have the US, but Korea will be like massive, and all the Korea. So this has not just happened by mistake, or that, K-beauty just happened overnight because someone thought that, doing double cleanse was cool. It was actually a push by the Korean government and the industrialists to export that culture, and they did a really good job of it. I'm not sure whether movies are doing so well, but I know that K-pop, the music, the TikTok stuff, some of the gaming stuff, the beauty stuff has done really, really well. Now, so that's kind of the K-beauty story, and and there's a reason why it's become big and so topical now. From a Pakistani or world domination standpoint for Conatural, I hope it happens. But basically, obviously, there is with certain trends, like with Korean, there is an aspiration, as you said, with influencers to look who liked Korean culture, who liked their skin, and so wanted to be it. So with India has been able to do this also, not as well as the Koreans, but if you look at Ayurveda, there's so many Ayurvedic companies now in the US. One of my favorite companies in the world actually is Forest Essentials. It's based out of India. They're also all about luxurious Ayurveda. They're also exporting all around the world and doing pretty, from like Hikmat for Pakistan is Ayurveda for India. So they are trying to promote that. There was a brand called, I think, turmeric, that made it to Selfridges a couple of years ago. Turmeric is such a South Asian ingredient, like we use it in every food, and it kind of made it to cosmetics. So I think that there's some really cool trends that we'll see, in the next 10 years, which are coming from Southeast Asia, probably driven from India, hopefully driven by Pakistan, for some cool ingredients that are being modernized, that we take to a global level.
I think the hope, though, is that it's owned by Pakistanis and not appropriated by Western cultures, right? Like oftentimes I'll see turmeric like lattes, right, which is like not owned. And so I think it's an important thing to be owned and driven by people like you. And so let's talk about that. What is the next 5 years look like for Conatural? What is that global world domination thing that you want to tell the world about, or tell this community about what's going to happen?
So we personally, so there's segments. World domination is a big thing and a big word, but we like to be humble. But
don't be humble. Just be yourself.
So generally, we feel that there is mass market appeal for some products, which are Pakistani made, Pakistani manufactured, which are good quality, and also because we can be cheaper, like literally because of the comparative advantage that we can take globally. And we're definitely planning to do that in some countries. Some are, and again, this is not all the SKUs, it is some that we've researched and we think that can do really well. Otherwise, we feel that also Pakistan is also a really, really big market. It's 220 million people. And with the rising middle class, it's going to be one of the largest middle classes in what they say 10 to 15 years, and rising incomes and more aspirational behavior and more access to information. And so we also want to be, for us, we want to be a leader in this category for, as a consumer goods, specifically, personal care market leader in this as well. And for that, also we're coming up with a couple of mass market ranges. But yeah, definitely world domination is on the agenda. But before that, we definitely plan to
Pakistan domination first.
Yes. No, Pakistan domination first, but fueled by a little bit of export here and there in certain segments. So that's definitely on the cards in the next 5 years.
And is there a plan to create products that are maybe in a price sensitive market where obviously not everyone can afford Conatural? Are there efforts or are there desires for you guys to create more mass market products for the greater population?
Yes, so that's a bit of a hard question, because like now it's hard to also define mass market now. So if you talked about like 5 years ago where the dollar was 105 rupees to a dollar, at that time you would say, okay, Pakistan is expensive. But now the dollar is about, these days I think it's about 155. Last year was 165 rupees to a dollar. And so a lot of the products that were being imported became very, very expensive. And it was not just only the exchange rate parity that made them more expensive, but also the government. There's been a push over the last 5 years of this government against imported goods because, it just drains our foreign exchange. And so duties on, let's say, imported products have also gone up by almost 100%. So that has given impetus for local manufacturers to actually come in and do a lot of import substitution. And that is one of the things that we wanted to do. And it's, a massive part of our strategy, which is that why do we still need imported products when we can give you the same for a much cheaper price? Mm-hmm. So again, when you say mass market product, we are now pretty mass market in terms of some of the FMCG products. Yes, we can't compete with totally rural-based mass products. Like, for example, there's some really amazing big brands here, like Pfizer Beauty Cream or Golden Pearl or Parley. We can't compete with them, and that's not our market. We want to do very, very high quality at the cheapest price that we can, but we still be premium in Pakistan. And now if you look at our pricing, we're competing with L'Oreal, we compete with Nivea, we compete with Olay, some of the mass market high street brands, as you call them. So I mean, and then are we planning on launching more these type of mass market products as compared to very premium products? Yes, we are.
Okay, cool. So last question. Actually, Ali asked it in the chat, and it was going to be, we were running out of time, but I want to leave us with a good call to action for this community. So how can the Bach Launch community here support what's happening with Conatural? Can you give everybody a good call to action to leave us with today?
We are looking for some distributors across the world, and there are some markets that we're specifically looking at. One of the markets that we feel that we potentially could do well in is some of the European markets as well as the US market. And I've got data on specifics. But one of the ways that Bach Launch community could help us is to find us distributors outside of Pakistan. We don't really need any fundraising right now. We're pretty well funded. And technical support, we're also good. We also know where to reach out. But distribution abroad is somewhere that we're always looking for help. And if anyone is, out there in Bach Launch who is FMCG or, can get us inroads into some international markets, that'd be amazing. And in a couple of years, we'd love an exit. So if anyone can help me and Rima sit down and talk about, how we plan those exits, even start talking about them now, then that would be a massive help.
I think those are great calls to actions. I would also add that for everyone in this group, buy Conatural. I think that buying made in Pakistan brands, but especially Conatural specifically, I'm a big consumer of it, as Myra knows, like talk to her about all the different products that I buy all the time. And so it is an amazing brand, amazing products. So beyond what she just gave as like great calls to action, just be a consumer of Conatural. And as a result, you are her best brand evangelist for what she's building. And the steps for world domination are going to happen right here in this community. So thank you everybody so much. Thanks to the Bach Launch community and to Ali, but most of all, thank you to Myra for being an amazing boss lady that you are and for being a friend as well as someone that I'm just constantly in awe of. So thank you for letting me moderate this discussion today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great. Thank you, Ali. Thank you, Bach Launch, and thank you, Faisal. Hope to see you all soon.
Right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.